So let's dive a little deeper into functions. Now you can picture a function as being a group of related statements that perform a specific task. So let's create a function that, whenever it is called, in other words, whenever we tell Python to run our function, we will welcome the person who has called it. Now, getting Python to execute a function is also known as calling a function. The first thing we need to type when creating a function is the keyword def, D-E-F, and this indicates the start of the function definition. After the def keyword, we can give the function a name. So in this example, I will give this function the name welcome. Now, when naming functions, it follows the same rules as if we were writing variable names or writing any identifier in Python, so keep this in mind. We then follow the name of the function with parentheses. Now, inside the parentheses of functions that we've used so far, you will notice that we sometimes pass items into them, and the items we pass in are called arguments, and we pass the arguments into specific parameters, and these parameters can be seen as the controls of the function. Now, it's inside these parentheses that I've placed after the welcome keyword where we define the parameters of our function, through which we can pass values to a function. Now, they are optional, and we will discuss parameters and arguments in a subsequent video, but just note here that this is where we would usually define the parameters for our function. We then put a colon to indicate the end of the function header. So where have we seen colons before? Well, we've seen them when working with conditional statements and also loops. So in the same vein, what comes after the colon is the body of the function that will be executed when we call the function. We then need to include one or more valid Python statements within the function body. If we don't know what the function will do at this point, we can always put in the keyword pass, which we saw when we covered loops. The same concept applies here, and we will not run into an error if we just put pass into the body. It's also worth noting that the statements must have the same indentation level, which we know is automatically applied for us in Jupyter Notebook and other IDEs of choice. So in our function, we're going to make it a little bit more interesting than just putting pass, and we're going to get the function to print hello and welcome. How are you? Now, once we have defined a function, we can call it from another function, another program, or even the Python prompt. And to call a function, we simply type the function name with the appropriate parameters. Now here we haven't defined any parameters, so if I were to simply type welcome and then put a set of parentheses, you can see that we print to the screen, hello and welcome, how are you? Which is what we defined in the function. Now if I were to pass in an argument into these parentheses, so let's say I put the string Dean, you can see we run into a type error, and it tells us that the welcome function takes 0 positional arguments, but 1 was given. This is because our original function definition doesn't expect us to consume any arguments into our function. So it will only run if we simply put parentheses after the function name. Now if I were to remove the parentheses and simply call the function name in isolation, you can see that we no longer print hello and welcome, how are you to the screen, but we get this statement back telling us that we've requested a function from main, which is the name of the top level environment of the program, but more on this later, and the function's name is welcome. So in order to call the function and get the function to do something, we do need to put parentheses afterwards. Now one final thing to note is that in Python, the function definition must always be present before the function is called, otherwise we will get an error. So if I were to cut the function definition and place it after the function call, you can see that we run into a name error when we try to call the function, and it tells us that the name welcome is not defined. So always make sure that function definitions are present before trying to call the respective function.